The mess hall of the Harlaxian Interstellar Brigade's main battlecruiser was a cavernous chamber of polished metals, glowing conduits, and the constant background hum of a ship that had seen more star systems than any human mind could comprehend. Rows of elongated tables stretched beneath towering ceilings lined with holographic maps and animated star charts. It was here that the brigade's soldiers, hardened veterans of countless off-world campaigns, gathered not just to refuel their strange, gelatinous bodies, but also to trade stories, debate strategy, and occasionally indulge in a bit of humor, at the expense of primitive species. Captain Zerath 9 presided over these gatherings like a general on a battlefield. His voice carried the gravelly resonance of authority, and his luminous compound eyes swept the room as he spoke. Tonight, the topic of entertainment was Earth. More specifically, Earth's myths. I mean, have you ever heard of a more nonsensical creature than this? This Bigfoot, Zerath said, a laugh bubbling up from deep in his segmented torso. He raised a clawed hand and flexed it in what the humans might call air quotes. A giant ape that just wanders the woods, avoiding every human who tries to photograph it? Come now. What's the human term for it? Urban legend? That's being generous. The soldiers erupted in laughter. It was a sound that would have chilled a human spine. A dry, clicking cacophony that bounced off the walls like the chatter of 1,000 beetles. Besides Zerath, a younger lieutenant added, "And what about this Nessie thing? A sea serpent, they say. If their oceans are that shallow, how could it possibly remain hidden? They think it's been lurking there for centuries." More laughter followed, louder this time, as if the idea of a massive creature evading human detection was the most preposterous notion imaginable. Zerath's mandibles twitched in a smug smile. Humans are remarkably gifted at imagining things. They'll never understand. Their cryptids, their UFO sightings, UFOs. How charming that they can't even identify their own weather balloons or military aircraft, and don't even get me started on their so-called ghost stories. He glanced down at the lieutenant. Do you know they actually believe in spirits of their deceased? As if energy and consciousness somehow linger after biological termination. It's laughable, really. The mess hall rang with more amused clicking, a chorus of disbelief and superiority. Zerath leaned forward, his tone dropping slightly. And, yet my fellow Harlaxians, what do these myths tell us? They tell us just how primitive, how fearful these humans are. They live on the edge of a vast universe, and instead of seeking knowledge, they cling to tales of monsters, aliens, and lights in the sky. They're infants, grasping at shadows. As the laughter subsided, one of the older soldiers, a grizzled trooper named Thriss, tapped his feeding utensil against the metal table. "Captain, these human stories, they're amusing, sure. But are they worth this much attention? It's not like we're going to learn anything useful from them." Zerath's eyes glittered, the glow intensifying as he turned to Thriss. But that's the point, isn't it? We don't need to learn anything. We need to remember how far we've come. The humans are a reminder of what we once were. Small, scared, huddled around our own campfires. Laughing at their myths isn't just fun. It's a reminder that we've outgrown that phase. We've moved beyond. Thriss nodded, though not without some hesitation. The rest of the soldiers clicked and muttered in agreement. They didn't know it, not yet. But the very myths Zerath ridiculed would soon shift from joke to something much more profound. For now, though, they laughed and bantered late into the ship's artificial night cycle, secure in the belief that their perspective was the only one that mattered. A few cycles later, Sergeant Telrick returned to the battlecruiser, his silhouette casting long shadows on the metallic floor as he stepped through the airlock. The usual buzz of the ship quieted as the garrison saw him. The sergeant was one of their most seasoned scouts, a Harlaxian known for his level head and methodical nature. But now his appearance was a little off. His tentacular facial tendrils twitched irregularly, and the bioluminescent patches along his neck glowed faintly, signaling stress. The mess hall was alive with chatter when Telrick entered. Captain Zerath 9, as usual, sat at the head of the table. He was entertaining the garrison with another mocking tale of Earth's supposed UFO sightings, his voice booming as he recalled humans blaming aliens for missing livestock and crop patterns. The soldiers chittered with amusement, their mandibles clicking and glowing in rhythm. Telric, Zerath called out, waving him over. Back already? Did you scare some humans out of their rickety little fishing boats? His voice was thick with humor, expecting another story that would elicit laughter from the ranks. Telric didn't respond right away. He moved to the table and stood there, silent, his usual crisp demeanor absent. He looked at Zerath, his multiple pupils constricting slightly, and said, "I need to report something." Zerath paused, reading the tension in the sergeant's posture. "All right, what did you find out there? Another human myth we can add to the collection?" His tone was light, but his antennae twitched, betraying a flicker of curiosity. Telric shifted uncomfortably. "Captain, I think it's not a myth." The mess hall quieted. The soldiers leaned in, mandibles clicking lightly in anticipation. Zerath tilted his head. "Not a myth, you say? Which myth are we talking about?" "I was at the perimeter of the so-called Bermuda Triangle," Telric began, his voice steady but subdued. "Standard energy scan, basic observation. But then, I started to lose signal on one of the drones. It wasn't just interference, it felt deliberate. I sent another drone to investigate, and before I could even adjust its course, it vanished. Not disabled, not damaged, just gone." Zerath gave a small, disbelieving chuckle. "Gone? What, you mean some human trawler picked it up?" "No," Telric said firmly. "It was as if something took it. I reviewed the telemetry. No human vessel. No aircraft, no natural phenomenon I could identify. Just a sudden spike in energy, a distortion in the surrounding space, and then nothing. It felt—" He hesitated, the glow along his neck dimming slightly. "Intelligent." The silence was deafening. Zerath's expression hardened as he processed what Telric was saying. "Sergeant, you're telling me you believe you encountered— what? A human phantom? One of their cryptids, a ghost ship?" His tone bordered on incredulity, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of something else— concern. "I'm telling you I encountered something I can't explain," Telric replied, his voice tight. "Something that didn't act like a natural phenomenon. Something that fits the descriptions in those human myths." Laughter bubbled up from one of the younger soldiers at the far end of the table. "You're pulling our leg tentacles, aren't you, Telric? Trying to get in on the captain's joke?" Telric turned to face the soldier, his expression cold. "I'm not joking." Zerath raised a hand, quieting the room. "If you're serious, Sergeant, then I need to understand exactly what happened. What else did you see?" Telric shook his head. "Nothing visible, but the energy patterns were wrong. The telemetry felt like it was folding back on itself, like the space around that region wasn't behaving normally. I can't explain it, but it left me feeling uneasy, like we were being watched, not by humans, by something else." The soldiers glanced at each other uneasily. They were warriors, explorers, conquerors of countless systems, but the idea of being watched, truly watched, by an unknown force was unsettling. Zerath studied Telric for a long moment. He could tell the sergeant was serious, but the captain wasn't ready to accept that this might be more than a coincidence. "All right, Sergeant, your report is noted. You've had a long deployment. Get some rest, and we'll analyze the data later." Telric hesitated, then nodded and walked out of the mess hall, his steps heavy. The moment he was gone, the room broke into a low murmur. "Do you think he really saw something? Could just be sensor malfunctions." "Telric doesn't scare easy." "Yeah, but this sounds like—" "Enough," Zerath said, silencing them. "It's just one report. We'll look into it, but let's not start imagining things." He leaned back, his expression calm, though the glow in his eyes had dimmed slightly. "After all, we're Harlaxians. We don't fear myths." The laughter didn't come back as easily that evening, and as Zerath left the mess hall later that night, he couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted, that maybe, just maybe, Telric had brought something more than a story back from the edge of human space. Captain Zerath 9 stood on the bridge of the Harlaxian battle cruiser, his clawed hands clasped behind his back. Before him, the view screen displayed a tranquil section of Earth's ocean, Calm waves, faint clouds, no signs of civilization for thousands of kilometers. The very coordinates where Sergeant Telrick had encountered his mysterious phenomenon. Zirath's team stood ready, a hand-picked group of soldiers known for their keen observations and skeptical nature. He wasn't sending any impressionable rookies on this mission, only seasoned professionals who wouldn't spook at every odd reading. Still, despite their expertise, there was an undeniable tension in the air. "All right," Zirath said, his voice cutting through the silence. "Let's confirm what Telrick encountered. We'll deploy drones first, followed by a full sensor sweep. I want every energy signature cataloged, every anomaly logged. Understood?" The soldiers snapped to attention. "Understood, Captain." They launched a fleet of reconnaissance drones into the area. The small disc-shaped machines zipped through the salty air and hovered low over the waves, scanning for electromagnetic fluctuations, gravitational distortions, anything out of the ordinary. Meanwhile, the ship's long-range sensors swept the region, gathering data with a precision no human technology could hope to match. At first, nothing appeared unusual. The ocean was just an ocean, as vast and unremarkable as it seemed from orbit. Even so, the bridge crew worked methodically, logging every small reading. A brief magnetic ripple here, a faint gravitational eddy there, minor anomalies that could easily be attributed to natural phenomena. Zirath stood with his arms folded, watching the numbers scroll across the displays, waiting for something conclusive. Hours passed, and the tension eased. The crew began to relax. Some even exchanged quiet remarks. Maybe Telrick's equipment really was faulty. He was probably just tired from his mission. Zirath allowed himself a small smile. This was exactly what he'd expected. Just a few minor glitches and nothing more. Soon he could put this human myth nonsense to rest once and for all. But then one of the drone operators called out, "Captain, we've lost contact with Drone 7. Zirath's head snapped toward the console. "Lost contact? Explain." "It's just gone. No signal, no telemetry. It didn't crash, it didn't malfunction. One moment it was there, and the next, nothing." The bridge fell silent. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. Zirath's mandibles twitched. "Deploy another drone to that exact position. I want to know what happened." A second drone was dispatched. The crew watched its feed closely as it approached the coordinates where Drone 7 had disappeared. The drone's onboard camera showed nothing unusual, just the dark blue surface of the water, glinting faintly under the Earth's distant sun. It hovered for a moment, then began to descend toward the waves, and then it vanished. There was no explosion, no distortion visible on the screen. The telemetry just stopped. One moment it was there, and the next the drone's signal cut off as if someone had flicked a switch. Zirath's hands tightened into fists. What in the name of the void is going on? Another operator spoke up, her voice uneasy. "Captain, we're picking up a faint energy signature near that last known location. It's not consistent with any known Earth technology, or ours." "Bring it up on the main display." A shimmering pattern appeared on the screen, a faint pulsing glow just beneath the surface of the water. It wasn't the green of Earth's plankton blooms, nor the blue of its oceanic depths. It was an unnatural hue, shifting between violet and gold, rippling like heat waves. The crew stared in silence. Zirath's compound eyes narrowed. "Prepare to lower a probe. I want direct readings from the source." The probe was released from the ship's underside, descending quickly toward the glowing anomaly. The tension on the bridge was palpable as everyone watched its approach. Closer, closer, and then as the probe entered the glowing region, the entire ship shuddered. "Report!" Zirath barked. "Energy spike!" a technician shouted. It's off the scale. I've never seen readings like this." Before Zirath could respond, the glow beneath the waves brightened. The view screen filled with light, and an unnatural hum resonated through the ship. Deep, powerful, almost musical. The sound rattled the hull, vibrating through every bulkhead, every console, every alien body. The crew clutched their consoles, their seats anything to steady themselves as the ship seemed to drift closer to the anomaly. "Full reverse thrusters," Zirath ordered. "Get us clear." The engines roared to life, but the ship barely moved. The glow and the hum intensified, as if the anomaly were holding them in place. The lights on the bridge flickered, and the screens began to distort. Zirath glanced around at his crew, their confident expressions replaced by worry and fear. Then, as suddenly as it began, the glow dimmed. The hum faded, the ship's systems normalized. The probe was gone. Zirath stood motionless for a moment, his mandibles tight. "Status report." The crew scrambled to check the systems. Engines back online, sensors stable, no sign of the anomaly. "Was it a weapon?" one soldier muttered. "Some kind of human defense technology?" "No human technology is that advanced," Zirath said, his voice grim. "Whatever that was, it wasn't them." He turned toward the view screen, his gaze lingering on the now empty patch of ocean. His doubts about Telric's story had evaporated, replaced by a nagging unease. Something was down there, something powerful, intelligent, and far beyond human comprehension. And now, Zirath knew. The human so-called myths weren't as harmless as they'd thought. The journey back to the Harlaxian battlecruiser's forward station was eerily silent. The usual banter among the crew was absent. No one dared joke, not after what they'd experienced. Captain Zirath 9 sat in his command chair, staring out of the ship's main viewport. The Earth, now a small blue dot in the distance, seemed impossibly still and fragile. He'd never paid much attention to the human stories before. Now they haunted him. As the ship docked, the crew disembarked in quiet, orderly fashion. The mess hall, usually bustling and loud, was subdued. Even those who hadn't been part of the mission sensed the shift in atmosphere. Everyone knew something had happened, and though the soldiers whispered among themselves, no one spoke openly about it. Zirath retreated to his quarters. The doors hissed shut, sealing him off from the subdued murmurs of his crew. He activated the console at his desk and began reviewing the data from the mission. But no matter how many times he analyzed the numbers, the result was the same. The anomaly defied explanation. The energy signatures were unlike anything in the Harlaxians' extensive database. The disappearance of the drones had no logical cause. The overwhelming hum and the gripping force that had held their ship in place could not be accounted for. It was only a few cycles later, after much deliberation, that Zirath decided to address the crew. He called a meeting in the central hall, a rare occurrence that drew every soldier, technician, and officer. They gathered in the vast, domed chamber, their glowing eyes fixed on their captain. Zirath stood on the central platform, his hands clasped tightly behind his back, his usual air of superiority replaced by something else. Uncertainty. "I've reviewed the data," Zirath began. His voice was firm, but it carried a weight that made even the most seasoned veterans uneasy. "What we encountered near Earth was no human weapon, no natural phenomenon. It was something we don't understand." The murmurs started immediately, hushed and quick. Zirath raised a hand and the room fell silent again. Sergeant Telric's account, as it turns out, was not an exaggeration. The energy field, the distortion, the disappearance of our drones, all of it points to a force we cannot identify or control. The humans have their myths about the Bermuda Triangle, about mysterious lights in the skies and ships that vanish without a trace. Until now, we thought those were just stories. But I'm forced to admit— Zirath hesitated, the words catching in his throat. "There may be something more to their tales than we ever imagined." Gasps rippled through the crowd, quickly followed by tense silence. The crew looked at one another, their mandibles clicking nervously. Some seemed skeptical, others simply afraid. The notion that the mighty Harlaxian brigade could be vulnerable to a force beyond their understanding shook them to their core. Lieutenant Thriss spoke up, his voice carefully measured. "Captain, are you suggesting that these human myths might actually hold some truth?" Zirath locked eyes with him. "I'm suggesting that what we encountered was real, Whether the humans understand it or not is irrelevant. Their myths, their legends, they may be their primitive attempt to explain something they've only glimpsed, something they've never fully understood. But now we've seen it too. The room fell into an uneasy stillness. The crew, warriors who prided themselves on their mastery of science and technology, were left grappling with the unknown. They had spent countless cycles laughing at humanity's ignorance, but now they couldn't help wondering if they themselves were just as blind. Zirath took a step closer to the edge of the platform. Let this be a reminder to us all. No matter how advanced we think we are, the universe is far larger, far stranger than we can comprehend. We will continue to monitor this anomaly. We will continue our work. But from now on, we will do so with caution and respect. Dismissed. As the crew dispersed, their voices low and subdued, Zirath remained on the platform. He looked out at the now empty hall, a strange sensation creeping over him. He was used to commanding respect through strength and certainty. Now he commanded it through a quiet, shared unease. The myths he had mocked were no longer jokes. They were a warning. And he couldn't shake the feeling that they had only just scratched the surface of the truth. Captain Zirath 9 found himself standing at the edge of the ship's observation deck, gazing out into the endless darkness of space. The view should have been comforting, familiar even. They had charted so many stars, claimed so many worlds, and yet the stars now seemed a little colder, a little farther away. It had been several cycles since the encounter near Earth, and while the crew had resumed their duties, a sense of unease lingered in the air. Zirath had ordered a strict regimen of scientific analysis. Every instrument on the ship had been recalibrated. Every scrap of data from the Bermuda anomaly had been reviewed 100 times over, and yet no answers emerged. Captain? Lieutenant Thriss approached from behind, his voice carefully measured. The science team reports no progress. They've run every conceivable simulation. Whatever we encountered, it doesn't conform to any known patterns. Zirath nodded slowly. I expected as much. They're recommending we escalate this to Central Command, Thriss continued. Submit the findings, request additional resources, perhaps even consult the Intergalactic Council of Sciences. With their databanks, we might… Zirath cut him off. No. Thriss blinked, startled. No, sir? Zirath turned to face him, his multifaceted eyes gleaming. We are not bringing this to Central Command, not yet. If the Council were to learn that a Harlaxian vessel was immobilized by an unclassified force, an unknown phenomenon, do you have any idea what that would do to our reputation? To our standing in the galactic hierarchy? Thriss hesitated. They would question our superiority, our dominance. Precisely, Zirath said. For now, we keep this to ourselves. If we were to admit that we, an advanced interstellar civilization, were humbled by a primitive planet's mythical region, we would lose the very authority that keeps us in command. Until we have answers, until we can explain this phenomenon on our own terms, it remains classified. Thriss didn't respond right away. He studied Zirath's expression carefully, then nodded. Understood, sir. As Thriss turned to leave, Zirath looked back out at the stars. He knew the decision was pragmatic. Still, something in his gut told him that the more they delayed, the greater the risk. The unknown force wasn't just an anomaly. It felt alive. And even if the crew didn't say it out loud, he knew many of them believed that whatever they had encountered wasn't finished with them yet. In the days that followed, the atmosphere aboard the battle cruiser grew tenser. The soldiers performed their duties with precision, but the laughter and casual chatter that once filled the mess hall had all but vanished. Even Zirath's occasional jabs at Earth's myths no longer landed. The jokes felt hollow now, their humor swallowed by the silent truth hanging over them. And then, the strange signals started. At first it was faint, a whisper on the edges of their communication bands. But as they moved deeper into the system, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. They weren't human signals, and they weren't any known Harlaxian frequencies. The patterns were irregular, like bursts of static interspersed with tones that seemed to resonate in strange, shifting harmonies. The science team struggled to decode it. "It's not random," one of the analysts said during a briefing. "There's structure here. It's almost like music, but not quite." Zirath frowned. "Music? That's the best you can give me?" The analyst shifted uncomfortably. "Captain, I know how it sounds, but these frequencies have a pattern that's mathematical in nature. It's as if something's trying to communicate or warn us." "Warn us?" Zirath's voice sharpened. "Explain." The analyst hesitated. "I don't have a better explanation. The tones repeat in cycles, but they don't stay the same. It's like they're evolving, changing in response to our own scans." The room fell silent. Zirath exchanged a glance with Thriss, who looked equally uneasy. "Keep decoding," Zirath ordered, his tone firm, "and increase security protocols. I don't want this signal affecting our systems." One by one, the signals began to interfere with their equipment. Lights dimmed unpredictably. Control panels flickered. The ship's AI started to lag, as if struggling under an invisible weight. The once pristine halls of the battlecruiser began to feel less like a fortress and more like a trap. And then came the dreams. At first, only a few soldiers reported them, nightmares of lights swirling in impossible patterns, of voices speaking in languages they couldn't understand. But soon, the reports grew. Soldiers, technicians, even senior officers began waking up shaken, their bioluminescent markings pulsing, faintly in distress. Zirath himself dreamt of standing at the edge of the anomaly, staring down into an endless void that seemed to stare back. He never spoke of his dreams, but he saw the fear in his crew's eyes and knew they were sharing the same visions. "Captain," Thriss said one morning, his voice low, "we're losing them. Morale is plummeting. The crew is terrified. They're starting to believe we've brought something back with us." Zirath's claws tightened around the edge of the command console. "They're soldiers, they'll endure." Thriss's mandibles twitched. "They're soldiers, yes, but they're also sentient beings. If we don't figure this out soon, it won't matter how disciplined they are. Fear is spreading like a virus." Zirath's gaze hardened. "We'll find the source. We'll end it." But as the signals grew louder, as the dreams became more vivid, even Zirath began to wonder if there was any ending this. The myths of Earth, once a source of ridicule, now felt all too real. And in the back of his mind, he couldn't shake the thought that whatever had held them at the Bermuda Triangle wasn't content to stay hidden. It had found them, and it wasn't going to let go. The ship's corridors had grown unnervingly quiet. The humming of the engines, once a steady background reassurance, seemed strained, faltering at times like a heartbeat under stress. Soldiers who once marched with purpose now moved hesitantly, heads turning to catch shadows that weren't there. Even the mess hall, normally a place of loud camaraderie, had become little more than a hushed echo chamber. Captain Zirath 9 prowled the bridge, his steps deliberate, his mandibles clicking faintly as he stared at the latest reports. The strange signals that had plagued the crew's communications were becoming more complex. They were no longer just tonal bursts or harmonic waves. They were patterns, geometric, evolving, as if whoever or whatever was sending them was refining their message. "We're running out of time," Zirath muttered to himself. "Captain," Lieutenant Thriss spoke quietly from his station, "I've been reviewing the dreams." Zirath glanced over, his multifaceted eyes narrowing. "The dreams? Those are hallucinations, Lieutenant, brought on by stress and the interference." Thriss shook his head. "I thought so too, at first, but the descriptions are too consistent. The crew dreams of the same lights, the same patterns, the same overwhelming presence. And what's more, they're all dreaming at nearly the same time, regardless of their assigned duty cycles. That can't be coincidence." Zirath stopped pacing. "You're suggesting the dreams are connected to the signals?" "Yes, Captain. I think the signals aren't just static or interference, they're invasive. They're affecting our minds. Whatever we encountered in that region isn't just passive, it's trying to communicate or perhaps influence us." For a long moment, Zirath said nothing. He stared at the holographic star chart, the small blue-green dot representing Earth, hanging in the void like a baited hook. "And what exactly do you propose we do, Thriss? Follow the signals? Sail back to the Bermuda Triangle and ask it to stop?" Thriss's mandibles twitched, a rare show of nervousness. "I'm saying we need to understand it before it's too late. If we keep running blind, we risk more than just the ship's systems. Whatever's out there already has a hold on our minds. We need answers, Captain. And maybe the human so-called myths are the only leads we have." Zirath hated how those words landed. "Human myths," he hissed, his tone dripping with contempt. "We mock them for their ignorance, for their fear of the unknown, and now you're telling me to look to their superstitions for guidance?" Thriss didn't flinch. "I'm saying their myths are a reflection of something real. They don't understand it, so they call it folklore. But what if their legends about strange lights and vanishing ships are fragments of a larger truth? One we've now stumbled into?" Zirath stared at his second-in-command, struggling against the rising frustration and the growing unease that Thriss might be right. "Very well," he said at last, his voice cold. "Prepare a scouting team. If this thing wants to show itself, then we'll confront it directly. And if it refuses to answer us," his claws tightened into a fist, "we'll see how it fares against Harlaxian firepower." The reconnaissance mission was prepared swiftly. A smaller scout ship launched from the main cruiser, carrying a hand-picked crew of scientists and soldiers. They retraced their path back to the coordinates where the anomaly had first appeared. As they approached, the atmosphere grew heavier, the air in the cabin feeling denser, the instruments once again struggling against an unseen force. "We're in range," the pilot reported, her voice tight. "No sign of the previous anomaly yet." "Hold position," Zirath ordered over the comms. He was watching the mission from the bridge of the cruiser, every display screen showing the view from the scout's external cameras and its internal sensors. "Begin a full scan. I want every angle covered, no blind spots." The scientists on board deployed an array of probes, sending them down into the ocean. The probes moved in a synchronized pattern, forming a three-dimensional grid that mapped the depths. At first, everything seemed normal. Just water, currents, schools of Earth's marine life. But then the readings began to shift. "Captain, we're detecting another energy spike," one of the scientists reported. "It's coming from below, much deeper than before." "Adjust the probes," Zirath commanded. "Track that spike." The grid descended further, and then the main view screen flickered. For a split second, the image was replaced by static. When it returned, something massive and shimmering filled the display. It wasn't a ship. It wasn't a creature. It was a structure. An enormous geometric lattice of light and shadow pulsing rhythmically in the darkness. "What is that?" Thriss asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The scientists were scrambling to interpret the data. "It's not solid," one said. "It's not a physical object. It's more like an energy construct, an enormous self-sustaining field. And it's changing." "Changing how?" Zirath demanded. "It's shifting its configuration, as if it's reacting to us. The structure is aligning itself. Wait, Captain, the signals are intensifying. I think it's responding to our probes." "Pull them back," Zirath ordered. "We can't risk—" Before he could finish, the structure flared, sending out a wave of energy that overwhelmed the scout ship's sensors. The screens on the main cruiser went dark for several seconds. When they came back online, the scout ship was gone. Only the lattice of light remained, flickering like a vast, incomprehensible star trapped beneath the sea. Zirath gripped the edge of his console. "What happened?" "No sign of the scout vessel," the operator replied, panic creeping into his voice. "No debris, no explosion, it just vanished." Thriss's voice was grim. "It's the same as before. The probes, the drones, they're taken. And now the ship." Zirath stared at the shifting lattice. For the first time in his long, decorated career, he felt something foreign and unwelcome. Fear. The myths they had once laughed at now stared back at them, a silent, pulsing reminder that they had crossed a line they were never meant to approach. "Captain," Thriss said, breaking the silence, "what are your orders?" Zirath looked out at the lattice of light. He knew retreat wasn't an option, not anymore. This wasn't just a human anomaly. This was a challenge from the unknown, from a force that defied logic, reason, and everything the Harlaxian Empire had built its confidence upon. "Bring us closer," Zirath said, his voice steady despite the dread tightening in his chest. "We need answers, and we're not leaving until we get them."